Thanks for having me. This is my first talk of the week, so you may be a little surprised to hear this by the end of this, but this is the most coherent I get. That cannot be said of the later talks this week, I'm sure. This is on Fireweed Zinc. I'm the CEO and one of the directors. We IPO'd last year. May, started trading in June. It's a relatively new company. We put out a new resource just in January and working towards a PEA. Obligatory cautionary statements. Just quickly overview. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the company's history, our recent resource update, the expansion potential on the property, which I think is very compelling, as well as our valuation. So like I said, we went public in June last year. We had a pretty tight structure when we went public, and we've maintained that tight structure now. So we did a financing 3 weeks ago. We opened a $10 million financing, and 48 hours later, we closed it at 12.5. So the lead on that financing was Resource Capital Funds, who came in and now owns 13% of the company. As a company, having someone like Resource Capital's come in and put up that much money was a big vote of confidence for us, and we hope that the market recognizes that. They did a tremendous amount of due diligence on us and would not have come in if they didn't think that this project was viable. After that, that financing, we still managed to do the financing without warrants. So the only warrants we have on the books are owed to the agents for the IPO and this recent financing. So we maintained a pretty tight share structure at 30 million shares. So that's where our project's located. So we're in the eastern Yukon, in the Selwyn Basin. This is near the Northwest Territories border. The two deposits that make up the current core of the McMillan Pass project are the Tom deposit and the Jason deposit. Tom was founded in 1951, Jason 1974. Hudbay had united them in 2007 and had done some metallurgy in 2011 and 12 before shelving them and putting them on ice. And it took us 3 years from 2014 roughly to early 2014 to 2016, the end of it, to get a deal with them. We went public on the back of that option deal, and just prior to our recent financing, we exercised that option. So now we are the 100% owners of this project. Just a bit about the team. So myself, CEO and director, originally from Yukon, ex-Macquarie Bank, geologist by trade. John Robbins, who you may know from Kaminak, which sold to Goldcorp a couple of years ago for $500 million. And the rest of our board there, which I think is a pretty great board. We have a very diverse group of experience. So without further ado, the resource. So this has caught a lot of people's attention when we put this out in January. Looks, my fonts are screwed up. I'm not a graphic designer, so I'll plead innocence on that. But so 11 million tons indicated and 39 million tons inferred, both at 9.6 and 10% zinc equivalent, respectively. So this is a pretty substantial project by any metric. We think that we're not done here yet. We think that despite this really compelling size and grade, we think there's a lot more to offer on this project. And we'd note that if you change the NSR cutoff there, you don't lose a substantial amount of tons. We're not super sensitive to that. And we see that there's still a very large amount of tons at the higher cutoffs. And in terms of growing this thing, so the first thing, of course, you want to grow a deposit is you grow the existing zone. So this what you see here is the Tom West zone. This represents probably about half of everything. About half of the whole McMillan Pass project is located in this zone. So this is basically open to all directions. So I've circled two areas here. This area here first, so that's an area of pretty high-grade intersections as you're moving towards the vent of the system, of which there's not really been any step-outs that have truncated it. So we anticipate being able to step out into that area and add more high-grade tons. This is a particular appeal because we don't really believe in a cynical addition of tons unless they add meaning to the mine or potential mine. So when we're targeting these step-outs, it's our ambition to add tons that displace other tons in the mine life. And we'd also note that the other thing I have circled here, this little hole down here, this was drilled by Kamenko in 1990. They hit 14% at zinc over 14 meters and no follow-up to it. For a big company like that, they want to kind of do this big bold step out. They wanted to demonstrate mineralization continuity that far, and they did. and they didn't do enough drilling there to have it to the resource. Although I would note that the 2007 resource, which was the historical resource that we were relying on until we updated this January, actually included that hole. So we see that as an opportunity of an area that we could add more tons at a pretty good grade. On the Jason side, it's always been understood that the two sides of Jason, so Jason South here and Jason Main here, these are two sides of a syncline that have never properly been connected. So we see an opportunity there to add tons connecting these. We don't know exactly how much or what it would look like, but it would be reasonable to expect that it would be an approximate extrapolation between what you see in the two sides. So roughly in Jason South, you see a higher lead to zinc ratio, and then the Jason Main on this side being interpreted as more vent distal is very high zinc and low lead and silver. So I'd also note this area we have circled here, that was also in the old resource, the old 2007 resource, but was left out of this one because there wasn't enough intersections to include it. But that's some pretty spectacular intersections there, 13 meters of 7% zinc, 5% lead, and 120 grams silver. That's currently sitting outside our resource that's waiting to be added once we get another hole in that section. And then broadly over the rest of the project area, we've accumulated 20,000 hectares there, and we think it's all quite prospective. So Tom originally found, because you could walk up the Tom Creek and see the boulders of massive sulfide, and it didn't take a genius to walk up the hill and find the outcrop. Jason, although it does outcrop, they found through geochemistry mostly. But we know there's at least three sort of mineralized systems on the property: the Tom, the Jason, and this end zone. End zone's poorly understood and was not adequately explored back in the day because the two different properties, Mac was then owned by a different person than the Jason property. So neither really wanted to spend a lot of time exploring it because they knew any potential discovery there would likely trend off their property. So we're the first people to own both sides of that trend, so we're quite excited to get in there this summer. And this is just a bit about the area between Tom and Jason. This light blue unit you see here is the hanging wall unit. So everything underneath that's the potentially mineralized horizon. And so quickly, just to talk about valuation without droning on about it, as a relatively new company that perhaps not a lot of people are aware of, we've been doing quite well actually since November in the trends in the market, but we still remain one of the more compelling valued zinc plays out there. In terms of an EV per pound of zinc equivalent in the ground, we're still, if not the cheapest, very close to the cheapest. If I was an average on that basis amongst my peer group, I'd be pounding the table and saying this is not an average project. But I think it's a bit perhaps even absurd that we're still quite so attractively valued. But that's the opportunity. So in terms of near-term corporate objectives and news flow that would be meaningful to investors, I think the really big thing here is the preliminary economic assessment that's coming out in sort of 5 to 6 weeks. We understand that there's some cynicism around the project location and logistics and the concerns about that. But the nice thing about a PEA is that it puts numbers around that, and it's going to show that when you're 800 kilometers from port, there is an erosion to margin that comes with that. But with a project that is so large and with such good grade, there's ample margin there yet. So I'm very excited about that. I think that's about the most exciting thing we can put out. Despite the big splash our resource made, I think it's our PEA that's really going to be the wake-up call for the market. And then on the back of that, and with the money we've raised this summer, we'll be doing a large-scale drill program this summer with 3 goals, sort of some upgrading, moving towards pre-feasibility, some expansion of the known zones, as well as some regional exploration. And that's it. I'll finish a little bit early because I know we're behind. Thank you very much.